Alice Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding officer, I hope very much to say something similar to the Equalities Committee on Thursday, but I wanted to take the opportunity, the first opportunity in parliamentary time, to try and make things right. On Thursday, in an exchange on children's rights with the Minister, Marie Todd, I was captured on camera mouthing language that was neither parliamentary nor respectful. I apologise unreservedly to the Minister. Each of us in this chamber should strive to reflect the better natures of the people we are sent here to serve. And I am very sorry, and I will reflect on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr Cole-Hamilton, as noted, I would just point out that it's not a point of order for me, but for the committee, but your comments are noted. We're going to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of business motion 24151 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, setting out a revision to today's business. Could I call on the Minister to move this motion?
Officer.
Thank you very much. No members indicated they wish to speak on the motion. The question, therefore, is that motion 24151 be agreed. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. Thank you. So we're going to turn now to topical questions. Our first question today is from Fulton McGregor, who joins us remotely.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the report of the Independent Review of Sexual Abuse in Scottish Football.
Minister Marie Goujon.
This report provides appalling and harrowing testimonies of historical sexual abuse, and it will be shocking for anyone who reads them, including those who follow Scottish football. And I absolutely commend the courage and the bravery of all the individuals who came forward to tell their stories. The independent review found that most of the people who suffered sexual abuse didn't tell anyone else at the time, and on the rare occasions where it was reported to organisations or clubs, little or no action was taken. Now that's tremendously distressing, and it's had a profound and long-lasting impact for those who were abused. The review accepts that knowledge and practices were markedly different in the past than they are now, and it recognises the recent efforts of the Scottish FA and its members to put in place a child protection and wellbeing strategy. It makes clear that continued cultural change is imperative, and that includes continuing to work closely with those affected to improve processes, challenging distorted thinking about sexual conduct or violence, and creating positive attitudes to mental health. We fully support those aims. We also support the work of the police and prosecutors in investigating allegations to bring those perpetrators to justice. Now, a number of individuals responsible have now been convicted and sentenced, and there are also live criminal and civil proceedings still ongoing. And we would encourage anyone who has experienced sexual abuse to come forward, if they feel comfortable in doing that, to access the help available to them. The safety and well-being of all children and young people is absolutely paramount, as is ensuring the victims of abuse are supported both through the justice system and beyond that. And we will carefully, but with urgency, consider this report and continue to engage with the Scottish FA and other key partners to ensure that those findings are acted on. Thank you. Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Minister for that very detailed response. The report, as she alludes to, is very detailed and contains 97 recommendations, all of which are of a substantial nature. These recommendations include a proposed raft of measures to improve and enhance safeguarding, wellbeing and protection policies and procedures at all levels of the game. There are also quite specific recommendations, such as one to consider the setting up of a fund to support and assist those who have been affected. How important does the Minister think that it is that these recommendations are implemented by the football authorities, and will the Scottish Government offer support to implement these where it is appropriate to do so?
Minister.
I think what the member says is absolutely right, and I believe it's vitally important that these recommendations are implemented by the football authorities, and I would say that I'm encouraged by the Scottish FA's initial response to the report, and I'm sure that the individuals who've been affected by this and their families too would absolutely agree with that, and they'll be watching closely to make sure that robust and meaningful action is taken. Now, given it is a lengthy report and there are a lot of complex and sensitive issues within that, as I said in my previous response, we will be considering that very carefully, but I also want to highlight the urgency of the nature in which we'll be undertaking that work. And I'll also, because recognising the nature of the issues raised here, it cuts across a number of other areas in government too. So I'll be discussing that with my ministerial colleagues, as well as discussing that with other partners to see what more can be done to ensure that all possible steps are taken.
Fulton McGregor.
Thanks, Minister. Some of the testimonies recorded in the report, as you said, are harrowing, to say the least, and they include those of Mr Malcolm Rogers from my own constituency. These were children who were forced to experience the most horrific abuse while playing the game they loved. Most of us will never be able to imagine the permanent scarring that this will have caused these brave survivors. Recommendation 1 of the report is that clubs and organisations involved offer an unequivocal and unreserved apology to those affected. How important do you think it is, Minister, that these apologies are made sincerely to individuals and directly to them where it is possible, in order to help them find at least some closure on the trauma that they were subjected to?
Minister.
Fulton McGregor is absolutely right. The testimonies that are within the report are absolutely harrowing, and the review is clear that all organisations and clubs who failed young people in the past should apologise, and I think that's the very least that the individuals who are impacted by this and their families can expect. I welcome the comments that were made by the Chief Executive, Ian Maxwell, of the Scottish FA. He said last week that he reiterates his sincerest apology on behalf of Scottish football to all who've experienced abuse in our national game. And I know that some clubs, in response to the report, have now apologised or expressed their regret about what happened. The abuse that these young people were subject to was absolutely abhorrent, and I can only imagine the impact that that's had on them as well as on their families too. It's just unimaginable, and I believe that any clubs where young people suffered that abuse should apologise, and apologise unreservedly.
Thank you. Brian Whittle, to be followed by James Dornan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Minister agree that the Scottish Government investigation into historical sex abuse in care home settings and the compensation scheme that has emerged, although extremely welcome, is however discriminatory against those who have suffered similar horrendous abuse in other settings like sport and education, and may contravene human rights of those in that situation, and therefore the investigation and compensation scheme should be expanded to include all of those who have suffered such abuse in other settings?
Minister Murray-Hushaw.
The member raises a number of issues there, and I'd be happy to get back to him in response and with more detail. I mean, in terms of the report that we're discussing today, as I've already set out, there are a lot of recommendations and complex issues within that which we're giving very careful consideration to, which does cut across other areas in the Scottish Government as well, and we will be working urgently on that to bring forward a response and to take action.
Thank you. And James Dornan.
Presiding Officer, if memory serves me right, I first called for the review back in 2016, so I'm delighted this long-awaited report has now been published. I'd also like to pay tribute to everyone who's campaigned on this matter, and whilst I warmly welcome the SFA's report, we now need to see it drive positive change throughout football. But can I ask the Minister, what steps can be taken either by the SFA or the Scottish Government to ensure that the clubs take full responsibility for the abuses that happened under their watch, and not be allowed to escape this responsibility by claiming either that the boys' club connected to them is not connected to them, or by saying that the club in which the abuse was committed went into liquidation and it's no longer the responsibility of the existing club? War on words are fine, but we really need responsibility from the clubs.
Minister.
I thank James Dornan for his question there, because I just want to reiterate that ensuring that every child can play football, or any other sport for that matter, in a safe and secure environment is of paramount importance to the Scottish Government. And while recognising that football is a very different environment now, and strong progress has been made in recent years, the review demonstrates the terrible historical human cost of when that is of getting it wrong. And I believe that the Scottish FA is genuinely determined to do everything it can to address the issues in the report. And as I said in a previous response to Fulton McGregor, I am encouraged by its initial response. And likewise, some clubs have made statements which apologise for historical abuse. And again, as I've already stated in previous answers, we'll be working with the Scottish FA and other key organisations and partners to ensure that all necessary steps are taken here. Now, given the complexity and sensitivity of the issues and the need to carefully consider the long and detailed report produced by Martin Henry and his team, I'm not currently able to put a timescale on that work or to pin that down right now. But again, as I've said, we recognise that given the time that's elapsed since the interim report was published, there needs to be urgency applied to that, and we are working on this urgently.
Thank you very much. Question 2, Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what arrangements are in place to ensure that passengers entering Scotland from non-red list countries via airports in England are quarantined in approved hotels.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
The Scottish Government's policy on international travel is based on expert advice from SAGE on the need for a comprehensive approach. Where we recognise that a four nations approach would be preferable, the partial approach adopted by the UK Government risks allowing new variants to enter the country. Currently, anyone who lands at an airport elsewhere in the UK from a non-red list country and then travels to Scotland would not go into a quarantine hotel. We'll continue to press the UK Government to adopt a more comprehensive approach and require all international travellers to go into a quarantine hotel. The measures that we have introduced are designed to safeguard communities in Scotland, and I would again urge UK ministers to work with us in that important task.
Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary didn't really address the specific question, which is the predictable loophole of passengers arriving in Scotland via English airports being asked to quarantine by the Scottish Government in managed hotels in England. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, when exactly did he or other Scottish Government ministers make a formal request to the UK Government for that loophole to be closed? And in the absence of an agreement, the Scottish Government have said that they don't rule out closing the Scotland-England border. Now, given that there are 22 roads and 2 railways that cross the border, and every day thousands of people travel mainly from South Scotland to the north of England and back for work, for healthcare, for education, can the Cabinet Secretary enlighten us on the Government's thinking of how our already overstretched police could enforce the closure of the border to try to stop someone who, say, landed, for example, at Manchester Airport without stopping everyone carrying out legitimate essential travel? Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, in relation to the first point that Mr Smith made, both myself, Jean Freeman, the Health Secretary, and the First Minister all engaged with UK ministers last week on this particular issue and highlighted the need to make sure that robust action was taken in order to ensure a comprehensive system of hotel quarantines was introduced across the whole of the UK. And in failing to do so, the UK Government, following the red list approach, which they are implementing, risks leaving loopholes for people to circumvent the comprehensive system that we've introduced here in Scotland. To date, I'm still waiting for a formal response from the UK Government on that request, but we will continue to press them on this matter in order to try and address the issue of the loophole that they've created by the approach they are taking. In relation to the member's second point, you recognise that the important thing here is to make sure that the approach that we take in dealing with the risk of new variants being introduced into the country is about making sure that we listen to the expert clinical advice on what the most effective way in which to do that is. And no one should be in any doubt that the most effective way is a comprehensive quarantine system. And that's why we are looking at other options to try and address this particular issue if the UK Government don't move in the direction of that clinical advice. And I can assure the member we're looking at all options to make sure that we minimise the potential risk of the introduction of new variants of COVID-19 into Scotland that could compromise our vaccination programme.
Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. When the Cabinet Secretary announced the quarantine policy last week, he also said there would be a managed isolation welfare fund for travellers who may struggle to meet the charges associated with quarantine, for example, those where travel is absolutely essential for compassionate grounds. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell us why that fund has not been set up, and what should families do who are facing hardship but need to travel right now for those compassionate grounds?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the welfare fund is in the actual portal when someone goes to book their managed quarantine facility, where if they are unable to meet the costs associated with it, they can indicate that prior to having to pay in advance, and their individual case is then assessed. So the arrangements have been put in place into the portal which has been created by the UK government. But what I can assure the member is that if he's got any individual cases relating to his constituents that he has a matter of concern about, he should feel free to send those details on to me, and I'll ensure that the individual cases are fully considered.
Thank you. I've got 6 members who wish to ask supplementaries. It's just impossible to get through them all, I'm afraid. Bob Doris to be followed by John Scott. Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm glad to hear the Cabinet is talking about individual cases. My elderly constituent has been in the Canary Islands since December. Through no fault of their own, flights have been repeatedly cancelled, and they may overstay the 90-day residency requirements for that part of Europe. When they do eventually return to Scotland, they will need to enter managed self-isolation in a hotel. This will be financially challenging. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide some details of either hardship support or deferred payment schemes, and will this exclusively be for those in certain benefits, or will flexibility be able to be shown?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, so at the point when someone goes into the online portal, at the time when you're looking to book their managed quarantine facility, there is an option for them to highlight that they may not be able to meet the upfront costs and to indicate why that may be the case. It is linked into benefits at the present moment. However, I'm more than happy again to listen to any individual cases that Bob Doris may have from his constituents. I can also say that I do very much regret that we're in a position where we're having to introduce a scheme of this nature. And what I can assure members across the chamber is that the measures that we're introducing to make sure that our borders are as robust as possible, deal with the threat of new variants, will only be in place for as long as is required. And we will look to lift them at the earliest opportunity. But ultimately, at this present time, I'd like to re-emphasise that no one should be undertaking international travel unless it is absolutely essential. Now, therefore, I want to encourage anyone considering travelling at the present moment to try and avoid doing so if it is not essential.
Thank you. John Scott to be followed by Alison Johnson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I spoke this morning to a constituent who, along with her 5-year-old daughter, currently in Finland, where her partner is receiving hyperbaric oxygen treatment following a severe brain injury. With school now about to restart for their 5-year-old, the family want to return to Scotland, but now face a 10-day period of hotel quarantine. In the circumstances, including coping with the side effects of a brain injury, such as having seizures and caring for a 5-year-old, my constituent believes this to be practically impossible. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what dispensation from quarantine regulations can be made for this family in their uniquely challenging situation?
Thank you very much, Mr Scott. I think there was probably almost certainly too much hull round in that feed there for the Cabinet Secretary to hear. But Mr Matheson, did you hear any of that question?
Yeah, I think I heard most of it, Presiding Officer. What I would say is to Mr Scott is if he writes me with the details, because there are provisions within the exemptions for individuals who, for medical reasons, would be unable to continue to stay within a managed quarantine facility. But if he sends those details on to me, I'll ensure that officials look into the issue for him.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. And Alison Johnson.
Thank you. On the issue of vulnerable people who may be unable to afford the quarantine fee, I was contacted yesterday by the British Red Cross, who are concerned at the lack of guidance for people travelling to Scotland to reunite with loved ones on refugee family reunion visas, including unaccompanied refugee children. I note the Cabinet Secretary's comments about the portal, but the Red Cross would like to know when full and clearer guidance on the Managed Isolation Welfare Fund will be published. Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I believe that the information which the British Red Cross were looking for has actually been provided to them earlier on today, and that provides them with information they require for anyone who does hold refugee status and the exemptions that we have within the existing regime for dealing with issues of that nature.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Now, apologies to the three members I wasn't able to call there. I'm just conscious we've got a COVID statement from the First Minister coming up, and it might be that you can rephrase your question in a way that can be put to the First Minister on COVID. And on that note, we're going to turn to the